So Professor Fillion is here so we can start. And I want to respect everybody's time, that those of you that you are here. My name is Peter Ratcliffe, and among other things, I teach U.S. history at Macalester College, and one of the fields I specialize in is immigration history. And I've been involved with an organization called Jewish Community Action, which to some degree is the logic for this panel. I appreciate very much your being here, the last session of the afternoon, in this lovely but somewhat chilly space. I wanted to say a little bit about what I do and how I've gotten involved through Jewish Community Action. And then we have two speakers, Mayallen Keita-Brown from the Liberian community in the Twin Cities. How many of you know that the Liberian community in the Twin Cities is the largest Liberian community in the United States? Okay, so not many of you knew that. It's a fairly well-kept secret. And after Mayallen talks about the challenges that the Liberian community has faced with American immigration law and how they have organized with allies to try to improve that situation, we will then hear from Jovita Francisco Morales, who is active with the Mujeres group at the White House in Minneapolis, and she'll talk about their organizing efforts. One of the kind of things that I often talk about as a historian is how we understand the agency that people who are exploited or discriminated against, how they manifest agency in struggling against that discrimination. And I think too often we tell history from the top down, and we bring other people in, but only as victims, only as the objects of other people's manipulations. So I'm pleased that we have a panel today that is going to talk about how immigrants have organized on their own behalf and how they have found allies in their efforts to do so. So I became interested in immigration history because I was first interested in working class history and discovered that the working class in the United States has always had a significant immigrant population. I know that part of what Steve was trying to do with this conference was make connections with the new Latino community in Cold Spring, not far from here. And I mentioned to Rafael Morataya, who's a labor organizer trying to work in that community, that 100 years ago, the dominant language in Cold Spring, Minnesota was German. And during World War I, the Minnesota state government actually interceded in the community of Cold Spring and ordered them to stop teaching children in German in school and to stop publishing newspapers in German. And I thought, what a terrible irony it is that 100 years later, people who are the descendants of the victims of that discrimination might themselves be discriminating against Spanish-speaking people in their community. And it's painful for a historian to discover how little of our own history we know, and as a result, how sometimes we keep making the same mistakes that our ancestors made in the past. So I was drawn to immigration history because of these interests, and then I became increasingly interested not just in history, but in being active with immigrants in our own communities as ways to try to apply lessons from the past and to try to make people's lives, particularly working people's lives, better. And so I've lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul for 30 years now, and in that time we have become the largest Liberian community in the United States, the second largest Tibetan community in the United States. We have an enormous Latino community in both cities. The Twin Cities has become a very diverse and very interesting area, with challenges of racism, with challenges of exploitation. In my efforts to get involved in the community, I found that it's hard to accomplish much if you're a movement of one. And I looked for organizations to work through, and I was attracted to Jewish Community Action, in part because I am myself of Jewish ancestry, Eastern European, Russian, Polish, Ukrainian Jewish ancestry, but that had never really been a major part of my identity in my life. But I liked what Jewish Community Action was doing in the Twin Cities, because they had developed a framework for thinking about these issues that said that Jews have both experienced discrimination and marginalization. They know what it is to be treated badly by the mainstream of society. But at the same time, over the years, Jews have been successful and have developed some privilege, some resources, and that if Jews would be honest about the resources and privileges that we have, but also try to learn from our people's historical experiences, we might have something to offer to other groups. And in the case of Liberians, which was the first project that I began to get involved with, it was the Jews' experience with political lobbying and political organizing that helped develop strategies for how to get the United States Congress and the United States President to undertake actions to mitigate the consequences of the Liberian Civil War and the treatment of Liberian immigrants to the United States through a pernicious system called temporary protective status that said to people who had lived here 20 years or more, you have to go back and renew your papers every year. This might be the year that somebody decides you can't stay any longer. It doesn't matter that you have grown children here. It doesn't matter that you have jobs and careers. It doesn't matter that you might own homes. You could be told tomorrow you have to go back to a place that even today has an 80% unemployment rate. And so we tried to use our knowledge and experience of the American political and electoral system to try to develop strategies to get either executive orders or laws passed to improve the position of Liberians. The other big campaign that we got involved with had to do with indigenous Guatemalan immigrants who found themselves working in a meatpacking plant in Postville, Iowa, where they were being forced to buy used cars from relatives of the foreman, where women were being forced to date supervisors, where children were being put to work at an age below the legal age at which they should have been working, in which people were being cheated out of overtime pay, and all of this in a meatpacking plant that produced kosher food. And we said, as Jews, this is outrageous, that there should be something called kosher that pays more attention to how the animals are treated before they're slaughtered than it does to how the workers are treated. And so we threw ourselves into the campaign in Postville, Iowa. We're still struggling to try to get the ground rules of what's called kosher changed to respect the position of workers and the treatment of workers in the determination of kosher status. But that brought us into a series of projects with Latino and Latina immigrants in the Twin Cities and in greater Minnesota and the Midwest. And Ovita will talk a little bit about that. So I have found working through Jewish Community Action to be a way that I, as a non-immigrant, am able to bring some of my resources as a college professor and a historian, my ability to write articles, op-eds, to speak publicly in churches and synagogues, to bring my skills into this situation to try to improve the position that immigrants are in. And I hope that many of you, here we are probably halfway through this conference, that many of you might be thinking beyond how am I going to get a good grade in this particular course, into, well, what can I do as a white person, as a native-born American person? What can I do to make life more just and better for immigrants in our midst? And I think Jewish Community Action is one of the organizations that's tried to provide an answer to that. And has certainly given me the resources and the opportunity to do so. So we're going to hear first from Mayalon Keita Brown, who came to Minnesota in 2003, having lived through much of the Civil War in Liberia. And Mayalon is now working as a program advocate at the African and American Friendship Association for Cooperation and Development. It's a very long name for a place that has a relatively small office, and that works particularly with immigrants who have higher education and skills, but have difficulty getting licenses and professional employment positions here in Minnesota. So, Mayalon.
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, and thank you all for coming and listening to us. I will not be long because Peter has already said most of what I was going to say. My name is Mayalon Keita Brown, and as Peter said, I'm from Liberia, West Africa, a war-torn country. My fellow immigrants, most of them came also during the war. We had over 20 years of war in Liberia. So most Liberians came as an on-visitor visa, trying to run away from the war. Some of us were lucky, we didn't go through that route. But coming here, we realized that it was even difficult to stay here, because with the visa, which expire after 3 or 6 months, then you start facing the immigration issues. When are you going back? You have overstayed your time, you should be leaving by now. Or you are here illegally. And then you have problem being put on removal proceeding or deportation. And every year that was going on in the Liberian community. Then in 2007, we were able to meet with the Jewish community, who became interested in the Liberian issue. And we formed the Coalition for Permanent Residency, because it was like every year you have to go and renew your status. If you don't, you have problem with employment, because you need an employment authorization permit to be able to work. If you don't have that, it means that you're here illegally and maybe you're working illegally, which is not healthy for anybody. The Jewish community action called on many other immigrant communities, and we had over 15 other organizations who were interested in this issue, because when we first started, it was not only for Liberians who were on temporary protective status. We were like, there are other groups who are here. So how can we just advocate for one group and leave the others out? Okay, let's form a coalition, and we call it Coalition for Permanent Residency. With this coalition, we have been advocating, we have been mobilizing, organizing, going to the grassroots level, going to the state level, going to the federal level, asking for permanent residency. And we've been told that, how can you just leave from temporary protective status and go to permanent residency? Say it's impossible. But we are saying, if a law is enacted, it can either be repealed or but there can be another law that can really interact to put a law in place and accept these people as permanent residents. So we've been working on that, and every year is when President Bush was there, we went to him, asking him, requesting him to extend the visa for these people who are illegal. The Homeland Security was like, you have to get out, you have to get out. And most instances, when the Homeland Security gets in, people start going underground. People leave one state to the next, and they leave their good jobs, they leave their families. It just disrupts the whole family system, it disrupts the whole community system, it disrupts so many other things. So when you talk about immigration, it's not only one aspect of it, but it involves so many other things. And we became involved with all the advocacy. We talked with Senator Franklin wasn't there, but and Norm Comer. We talked with Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Representative Keith Ellison has been championing this issue for us, because when we even went to DC, he was there. He opened up his office for us. He's like, okay, come in and see what you can do. And we went to over 20 different congresspersons. Some of them were like, oh, we don't have any issue with immigration. But if you don't have issue with immigration, then why is it that people have to be hiding all the time? Why are people in immigration courts? Why are people being detained? And ICE is there, ICE, the immigration custom enforcer. They are there raiding people workplaces, arresting people and putting them in jail. So we went to so many other organizations, to so many work and places of worship, asking for their support. And it's like coming here to talking to you and getting you interested, telling you that you are not alone here. Many of you who be Native Americans, but we who are coming, we add to your value. And being immigrant, it is not a crime. One way or another, all of us came to America. Your ancestors came. We are here being new immigrants. What we have noticed in our advocacy journey is that those who've been here before are the ones who are really, especially the lawmakers, we tell them that they are the ones who are really stopping the progress or reform of immigration going on. And it should be like that. Having said that, I'd like to let you know that we have, like I said, 15 other organizations that have joined the Coalition for Permanent Residency. And few of them who have really taken the leadership, like the Jewish Community Actions, the Immigration Law Center of Minnesota, the Human Rights Advocates, my organization with the long name, AAFACD, and I also work with the Women Initiative for Self-Empowerment. That's the Immigration Women Group. And also the African Muslim Women Association of America. They are also involved in this immigration issue. So we all try to get to all of you, to get you interested, to request your support. And if you can give it directly, maybe you know one or two lawmakers who could really be of help to us. And the children born here are your colleagues, they are your friends. To see their parents just leaving and going back to a country that is underdeveloped, that they are now used to. The legal system is at zero. The employment rate is high at 80% or 85%. The health system is just not there. And people have been here over 20 years, used to the system here. Then you talk about human rights. And if you're saying that you advocate for human rights and you take these people from here, you uproot them and carry them back to where you say they are supposed to be, with all those barriers, all those challenges, then what is the essence of talking about or promoting human rights? Because in a way, you are violating their health rights, you are violating the educational rights, and so many other rights. So we formed this group, the Coalition for Permanent Residency, to indicate that we are not alone. There are others who are out there, and there are other people who are interested. And we want you also to get interested and see how you can get involved and help the whole group together. Thank you.
It's my turn now. Hi, how are you, everyone? Seems like I don't want you to sleep. I want you to hear how we're gonna collaborate, everyone. And my name is Jovita, and I'm from Mexico. It's a state of Mexico, north of the city of Mexico. They called Ixtlahuaca is the municipal, and the town is San Francisco del Rio. It's a indigenous community, and I'm came in 1995 in here, and I become a community organizer since 2000, I can say 2008, and so I work at White House Community Center, and I become part of community organizers nowadays, I can say that. But in the past, how I become as a community member to become an organizer, on 2000, I can say on 2000, I was on 2000, I involved in a community center, like I see a newspaper that it says, I was feeling like I was really fat in that time, and I say, okay, I wanna do exercise and things like that, and then I look it up in the newspaper when I went to shop my food one day, and then when I get there, I call the lady and they say, you can come over here and we can talk. When I get there, it was totally different than I thought. I thought it was to do exercise, and then I find a group of women that they was taking like a leadership training, and they called Entre Amigas in that time, and it still exists. And I took that training, and then I make a lot of connection with other Latinas women, and then I went to connect with other community who was doing other activities in different part of Minneapolis. And then I for one reason I get White House Community Center where I work now. I was involved in a Latinas women's that we developed in that group. We named Latinas Creativas, and then I was involved. Then on 2008, I took a training leadership at White House once I was working there, and there was Maria Cisnero, who was the facilitator in the group, and they hooked together with Alicia, and they asked me, do you want to be part of to take that training? And I said, yes, why not? And at that time I was on the receptionist working at the front desk. And then I took that training in 2008, and then After the 6-month training, I become organizer for the driver license campaign to make change in the law. And then in 2009, I get involved with JCA, Jewish Community Action, on the municipal ID. There was a good idea to have a city ID in Minneapolis, because we saw that once we are having the driver license campaign, and then that's how I get involved in Jewish Community Action and work together as a partner to try to pass the city ID. We're still working on it this year. For sure, we're gonna have something new. You will see the notice then next year maybe. And part of my, as a Latina community or as a Latina immigrant, it's been interested to come over here and learn a lot of in here in USA. When I came first, I didn't know the language that I get involved. A lot of people I was really surprised. First, it was the winter. It was really cold in that time, and I didn't bring jacket. And I remember when I get the airport, I see like white on the whole town, and I say, "What it is this? Is that like Alaska or something?" And because I usually see TV in Mexico, and I see something like that, but I never thought that it was to be here. And so that's my impression. And then I later, 4 or 5 years later, I learned about the Social Security number, to what do you use it for and what it's for. I didn't know what it was for. And so that's an experience really interested to know that. But also that we're working right now with Grupo Mujeres en Liderazgo White House is to pass the law in this legislation with the campaigns, driver license, and city ID local level with the city council member. The city ID we're working on partnering with JCA. It's we are having, the first is to see the issue, what is the issue and why we need the ID. And the ID that all the Mujeres in coalition with other community, with other organizations, like a partnership, and they call it the family partnership that we was part of the group in that time. And with JCA, we went to outside to see with the community. We ask people, how is that really important for you as a local city, because we know that really important is to have the state ID in Minnesota, but it's impossible because we need to pass a law with the driver license campaign. But in order to have a state ID, you have to have a Social Security number. In most of the people, they don't have, even if you came as a student or to study over here, you don't have that. There is a lot of barrier on that part. And so then we decide to work on local level until we was doing the campaign on the state. And yeah, so the city ID is right now almost we have 4 council members that they're supporting us on this project, and plus we have a lot of organizations that they're supporting this campaign, and we have a lot of community or a lot of petition that we asking for everyone to sign up. It's the city ID is a multi uses, and the purpose of this city ID is to have discount for everyone who is low income families, that they can have option to have discount in the store or any business who want to be part of the project. And then we trying to see the banks that they can accept it to open accounts. And we trying to see we're gonna talk with the library and see if they can accept this ID with to rent books in all the library. And The park meter too is another one that we want to use this ID as a park meter that you can pay easily. So it's a multi-uses. You just imagine to carry, instead of carrying 5 cards, you can just carry 1, and it should be have your all the information in your ID, but it should be in, so we just trying to discuss how we're gonna do this and how we're gonna develop. We're talking with bank to negotiate with the data card and all those things. But I think that I prefer if we can go with question, because I know the question is, I don't want you to be quiet and just sitting, and I don't want you to get boring for just talking, but.
Could you just explain that a little more? Who needs the ID and for what?
For who needs the ID in Minneapolis and for what? For everyone who lives in Minneapolis. It doesn't matter if you are Latino, Somali, African, white. It's for everyone who live in Minneapolis. What? Or why? What? Because there's a lot of, well, there is a classes, the second class, third class, and first class, and we see the first class, we, like, for instance, I see this over here, that the first class, the second class, and the third class, and people who are here, we don't have a lot of access to be over here. Well, the city ID is not gonna be the whole, but it can be increased. A lot of the community put it over here a little bit. People who live in the shelter, they don't have any ID, and most of the people that we have, like for instance, White House, I work at White House, and we serve food, the food shelf. Many of we request a photo ID, any kind of ID, and then we request a piece of mail. But then if they don't have, and I'm just assuming, White House, we have emergency food shelf, but in order to have to get food every month, you have to bring all this information. And so we think people who live in the shelter, and people who are low income, or people who doesn't have an ID. As a Latina immigrant, many of the Latinos community and Somali community that I know, they don't have any ID, and they want access to any other resources in the city, and they can't. And one of those is the food. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
My understanding is that consulates, like the Mexican consulate, would give IDs if you're a Mexican citizen, called a matricula cedula, that could, and then a lot of banks accepted that and to use as ID. And then there were some other consulates going to do the same thing. I just wonder if that's still in effect, and if this is just to be broader, or if those IDs are so useful or not now. That was a few years ago.
If I get you information, it's the consular ID in Mexico. It's for so this is the things. It's usually we don't wanna focus on Latinos community, but it's something that is gonna be benefit to the Latinos community, because let's see if the police gonna stop you and you show your matricula consular, and basically the police says point you as she's mentioned illegal, but it's an immigrant, and they say that you don't have documentation, and they put you in jail, and then jail automatically to immigrations. So basically, to show this ID, it's that it show, wow, if you are police, you're not gonna ask my status. I am Minneapolis, how we call our campaign, and I'm leaving this, and just whatever is the person happened or does or did, they can even pay the ticket or whatever they're gonna give them. So, but they're not gonna go to in jail and then be separate families. So in this, see in that picture over there in Latinos, they're gonna be a little bit benefit on that. But I don't wanna focus only Latinos. I wanna focus for the rest of the city of Minneapolis for who live in there.
So you're saying that you have to, one of the groups you could have to negotiate with is the police departments and the sheriff.
Well, the police, the chief of police in Minneapolis, he's supporting the campaign. He wrote a letter that it says that we're supporting the campaign. 4 council members that they're supporting, we just need 3 plus to have the data card and with the bank. So that's the key point, right? We're gonna discuss this coming week. We're gonna be discussing a little bit more how to do strategy in this, and then do next step. Formally for this year, we're gonna have the 3 more council members. But I know that the community, the power or the key is the community. The key is the community that unite, that we're gonna build, I think. If you just say, I'm supporting, but I'm not doing nothing, I'm just part of the, not only supporting, but the important thing is to do leadership. In that point, we can just work together as, I don't know, all together.
Yes, please.
I like your approach of being more inclusive because it affects a lot of people. I do get out of the vote registration a lot, and I see people that, retired people and the elderly that have exactly the same problem because, you know, they don't drive and they can't even go get a Minnesota ID because of the fees, and which are about $25 now. But so to have a city ID identifies the group that need it. And now I was wondering, what is your outreach to other communities, like seniors or other people that are in need of that?
Well, I have a PowerPoint that we talk with the GLBT people, how they're gonna benefit, the senior people who how they're gonna benefit students and all those. But I think that will be benefit for everyone,
You, please.
I just wanted a confirmation. So is the idea of that city ID a way to separate immigration policies from the everyday business that people have to do? In other words, there's too much link today. I mean, I'm an international scholar today. There was a time where as a student I had a social security. It was totally normal for exchange students to actually get social security number. Now it's not the case. For students, if they work here, they can then provide paperwork and then have a social security. So it's a little bit, I mean, basically there's a lot of change. So there's been more and more integration and linking immigration policies and control with getting a Minnesota license. So I'm interested in you telling a little bit more about how that, what is it, consulate?
Matricula.
Matricula. With the consulate matricula, it didn't prevent the police to ask for paperwork. What, in which way would the city ID prevent the same thing to happen? Could it be that the police is still going to say, okay, that's a great city ID, but still, show me some paperwork, show me some documentation? What's your plan to kind of walk around that?
But right now we have the separation order that they're not going to ask your status.
So that's part of the deal. That when you show your ID, or police officers cannot ask.
And you have your right. Your right is not to answer any question that they want you to ask. Just show your ID in the well, we have experience with other community that they say, and we talking with lawyers and say, you don't say nothing, ask your lawyer automatically, and be quiet and part of that. But I know that I did one in my case as an immigrant. I was stopped by the police, and I was talking to him, and they was asking for documentation, because they look your skin and automatically stop you, even if you're not Latina or even for different countries, right? And So I have the experience, and they was that, you know, I know my rights, and you're not gonna ask me, so what did I did? Did I did something? What is the felony, or what I have to pay with for that, for this situation that I made, if I pass the red line, or why is the reason that you stop me? And whatever is that, just do your job, whatever you're gonna do, and that's all. But not, they're supposedly not taking you in jail. But if you know your right, then you can say that. But for this city ID, the intention is to be recognized by the city ID for everyone, the police including. In that way, they don't have to. They just gonna focus on the felony, or how they say that you did, and that's all. But the matricula consular, I'm not gonna talk with the whole police, because I know many of the police, they do a great job, I think, and I know other police that they just asking for that specific documentation, but.
I think that, most of us would prefer to be fighting for comprehensive immigration reform nationally. That doesn't seem to be available. Then, in some places, we've thought we could get something good to happen at the level of state government. And that was largely the effort around the driver's license. And given what's happened politically in Minnesota, that doesn't seem possible either. And so I think it would be relatively easy for some of us to sit back and say, well, that door is shut, that door is shut. And I think that finding a door that can be pushed open, even if that door is not going to change the world, but that it's an excuse to organize people, to organize at a grassroots level, as Jovita has said, to put pressure on the city council, to say in a city like Minneapolis and in a city like St. Paul, both the mayor and the police chief would like to present themselves as decent human beings and liberal. Those of us who were around the Republican convention in 2008 know that there's another reality to that, but they would like to be able to present themselves that way. So it's a way to keep organizing and empowering, and I think it's very complicated, because we struggled in Jewish Community Action. What is it for an organization that comes from a community that historically was once made to wear yellow stars to be identified? So how do we make sure that this is not a card only for undocumented immigrants? How do we make this something that's across the board, and that tries to naturalize in a human, if not in a legal way, every human being, and to say, well, we all need identification, and this is a way that we can do that. So it's much more complicated, I think, than it seems immediately on the surface. But I'm now at a stage where I think anything that gives us a reason to go out and talk to our neighbors and organize people and to give them the space to feel that they can have an impact, that then we will change the state, and then we will change the nation. But it has to start at a grassroots level.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's important that the idea came from them. I mean, the idea came from the community.
We have a case, one of las mujeres, she took the children to the hospital by emergency, and when she get there, she was, the person who was in the reception, they asked for ID, and she showed her ID, but from her country. And then the lady, she said, no, I don't want this ID, I want a state ID. And she was like in shock, because you can imagine, you take your children and then you have to be like in a situation really, really embarrassed. For me, it's embarrassed, because you taking as emergency your kids, you just want your children to see by a doctor. And so that situation, we prevent that. Another case we have is in the school. Many of the parents, they called when I work at the front desk. they call me and say, Jovita, can you go to the end of the school because there's a red line because something happened in the school and they close automatically, like they call it red line or something. Huh? They locked down. And so they say, no, but you can go. No, but because they're gonna ask for my ID and I don't have. But you can take your matricula consular, even though there is a fair. How to tell the parents, don't be afraid, go and tell. But in order to something, they say, I want to have an ID that is recognized by the city and for everyone. That way I can be, I can go as a trust and more confidentially. And so that's a situation that we see in the community. Other is the student, and other is the for instance, the state ID. It's a cost to so many of the people who live like in the shelter or children or low income family. They don't have a lot of money to pay in the state ID. So we try to see the local city ID. They can pay less than that, and that way they can be benefit. Or if it's recognized by the city and they can open an account, why not? They can use it. And it's something that the city council member, they can provide this ID. So why we don't have that? And we have a lot of cases that we heard from the community. That's why they push us to organize and win the campaign. And hopefully they can motivate other students that they are here, that they can do something. And just imagine that this is not only for immigrants. I think everyone, even if you are an ancestor, like my children, I say, well, you are still immigrant because your parents came, immigrate this country to have, that way you can have a better future. So it's the same for you who are here, that your ancestor years ago, they came for a better future and have a job and a house and food. So that the same reason I'm telling you, we can work together, but we need to focus on something. And as a student, you have a lot of power. I can say that you have a lot of power that you can make change. If we have, as an immigrant, why not you?
Yes, please.
I have a question about Liberia. I don't have the dates correct, but some 4 or 5 years ago, I believe the situation in your country of origin, Liberia, changed. There was a president who was elected, and I mean, some kind of democratic process succeeded. And after that, instead of the situation becoming better, it became worse here, because you were told you came here as refugees, go back now,
go back.
You have a democracy, so why are you over here anymore? So how did you handle that? And yeah, I'm interested in knowing has the situation, how it is right now.
What happened is that in 2005, we had a democratic election, and I would say for the first time, a female was elected as head of state in Africa, which was historical and very good for the African and the Liberian image. But like you said, what happened here was that when that happened, 2007, the Homeland Security was like, okay, things are already in your country, pack up and go. But we have been in war for 17 years then. Everything was broken down. Then you say go. Go home to what? And the children who were born here, some of them were 17, 16 years old, and they know the American way of living. Do you take these children back to Liberia to assist them like that? So we decided to talk to the Homeland Security to give our people some time to get themselves together. They were not listening. That's when the Jewish Community Action and other groups came in and said, okay, instead of just going to the Homeland Security, let's go directly to the president, who has an executive order. And from that executive order, instead of being on temporary protected status, we were given DED, Deferred Enforcement Departure. And frankly, I don't know whether it's good or not, because the Deferred Enforcement Departure is like you are out of status. Anything, and if you go to for any benefit, or you go for any immigration issues, they tell you, you just here at the benefit of the president, but you don't have any status and you are illegal here. Whereas the temporary protected status, the US government had granted the group that protection. You were here with protection from the government. But right now, we don't have any protection. So every year, we have to go back, get the grassroots involved, get friends involved, get any group who will listen to us, to reach again to the president, because the Homeland is still insisting that we go back. And just last November, there were re-election, and the woman was re-elected again. But things are not all right in Liberia. What we have learned from our advocacy is that without the involvement of the community, you can be successful in this country as an immigrant. So we need you as a supporter.
So let me just add a little bit to that. In the process of dealing with that situation, we discovered, and this goes back to Manny's point earlier today about remittances, that the Liberian community in Minnesota alone sends $8 million a month to Liberia. And so the idea that people would be forced to go back to a place where the unemployment rate is 80% when they could be here contributing $8 million a month, at least to families back in Liberia, that became an important part of the argument. And the political stuff is very interesting. One element is, how do you organize political power if people are not voters? Which is a challenge that most of the immigrant communities face, which is why the issue, part of the issue for this panel, how do we get allies? So we need people who are voters to put the muscle on either city councilors, on state legislators, on US Congress people. That's been a major need to keep going. The second largest Liberian community to Minnesota's is in Rhode Island. And for a number of years, Patrick Kennedy, the congressman from Rhode Island, was the kind of point person in Congress on immigration issues for Liberians. Then he decided to retire. And so the decision was made that it was time to ask Keith Ellison if he would become the national point person for Liberians on the immigration issue. And it wasn't easy to, as good a spokesperson as Keith has been, to get Keith to take that on as a responsibility. So that's been going on. And then there's the weird politics of the Obama administration, that people said, well, the US ambassador to Liberia had been saying, we don't want to make the president of Liberia look bad. And so if the United States says the situation in Liberia is still so bad that we can't send people back, then people say Mrs. Johnson Sirleaf is not an effective president. Democracy is not really working in Liberia. So in some weird ways, Bush was easier to deal with than the Obama administration on the issue of the immigration status of Liberians. So that's been a factor in this as well. And then for a group like Jewish Community Action, where we're trying to maintain, as Mayallen has described, this Coalition for Permanent Residency. You've heard the kinds of issues that particularly the Mexicano community is facing that Jovita has talked about. It's very important not to allow the discourse to become reward these people because they're good immigrants. Because as a historian, I know that if some people get to be called good immigrants, other people must be bad immigrants. And so they get punished. So how do we maintain keeping everybody, again, like this ID campaign, keeping everybody at the same level without making the case that, well, these people deserve it especially because they've been so good. And so it's a challenging, it's this constantly moving set of forces that's involved. And it helps me understand why comprehensive immigration reform seems so hard. It seems easy to me to say, just make everybody legal and be done with it. You know, and they say, oh, then everybody would want to move to the United States. I don't think so, but that's what they think. Manny.
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult question. With respect to the Jewish Community Action, I've always found an area that has, in New York and other places, that progressive Jews have not broached, has to do with Arab, South Asian, and Muslim immigrants, and especially Palestinians. But throughout the region, they become racialized in New York. In New York City, many Pakistanis had to leave or left because of violence. A lot of Yemenis, it's a huge Yemeni community in New York City, and many of them were detained by Homeland Security and other places. I don't know exactly what the demographics of that community, or the communities, obviously Somalians are part of that community, I don't know the demographics necessarily of that community, but I was just wondering if you could comment on how Jewish Community Action addresses issues of the Arab, South Asian, and Muslim peoples, and maybe the Palestinians as well.
So I think that the organization's position on immigration is that all immigrants deserve support, period. And at the same time, Jewish Community Action claims to not take any positions on questions that are not domestic. And you're a scholar. I mean, how can you talk about immigration only domestically, you know? And so they absolutely, as an organization, refuse to touch issues of the Middle East politically, which I find I just have to shut up about that stuff, and that's not easy. But that's their position. May Ellen was telling me on the way up that this organization that she's now working for, that is trying to educate, place, legitimize professionals from different parts of the world, that they get a grant in the name of diversity from the state of Minnesota that says, well, we'll help support people of color who are seeking professional jobs based on education they had back home. And the state of Minnesota's definition of people of color excludes Iraqis.